everyone, and welcome to STEAM Time. My name is Dayna. I am the Buena Vista Branch Manager with Monterey County Free Libraries. Today we're going to be doing a simple yet fun experiment all about physics. But let's talk a little bit about what physics is first. It's a really large branch of science. It's one of the major branches of science. But we're just gonna touch on it briefly before we actually jump into our experiment. And a great way to find out about things such as physics, we have on our website at emcfl.org, we have a lot of databases that provide great information, especially for kids. We have a student resource page full of information, all for kids. One of those databases is Britannica School Elementary. So I logged into the database and I looked up physics. So let me give you their definition of physics. So physics is one of the major branches of science. And so people who work in this field are called physicists. So physics studies matter. And matter is what makes up all physical objects. So that's what matter is. So physics studies matter and forces, so that is pushing and pulling. And then it also studies the different types of energy. So the experiment that we're doing today is called chasing shapes, chasing hearts, floating shapes. I've seen it named a few different things, but it's going to be an experiment that is all about physics. So stay tuned. I'm going to walk you through exactly what you need for the experiment and how to do it. We just talked a little bit about physics. So now let's talk about what you're going to need to do our chasing hearts or chasing shapes experiment. Really simple. You're going to want the star of the show are dry erase markers. So I just have the Expo brand. You probably have seen your teachers use these on a whiteboard. So any color dry erase marker. You're also going to want a plate or a dish. I chose white so that it's easier to see what we are drawing. And also you want a high shine surface on your plate or your dish. So you can see mine looks glossy. So I have two different styles of plates, slightly different surfaces. And then I've also seen the experiment done on metal. I'm just going to be using a Dollar Tree, it's like a little pan. If you have non-stick pie pans at home, you can try those. And then you're going to want water. So I actually just have my measuring cup filled with water. And then there's a few things we can do with this experiment. So if you have a straw handy, grab a straw. If not, I'll show you how to do the experiment without a straw. So that is all it takes. So let's jump into the science behind the experiment and then we'll get started. But let's talk about the science. What exactly makes our dry erase shape float in water? So as you can see, I've used a purple dry erase marker. I made some hearts. We're getting close to Valentine's Day. It's February. So I decided to draw hearts, and you'll notice that I have an open heart here, and then I've colored some in. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit. So why are they going to float off the plate once we add water? What exactly is the science behind that? So it's actually relatively simple, and it has to do with the dry erase marker. So the ink that is used in the dry erase marker is insoluble. What that means is it does not dissolve in liquid. So in our case, for the experiment, it does not dissolve in water. It's also low adhesive. So you'll notice when you've seen your teacher write a sentence on the whiteboard, it easily comes off the whiteboard when you wipe it with, let's say, a paper towel, versus a Sharpie, which has more adhesive ink. If we had used a Sharpie on our plate, it would not lift up and float on top of the water due to that adhesive nature, and it's also not insoluble. It's meant to be permanent, whereas the dry erase is not. It is insoluble. So that is the science behind the experiment. And then we're going to tie in physics. We're going to use motion and force and energy and matter to make our shape float and move across the water, both by blowing through our straw or using our finger to push our shape around. So stay tuned, and we're going to dive into the experiment together. And we're going to start with the plate that I showed just a little bit ago. So it's my plate with the hearts, and I'll show you just as an example. We could even draw, let's see, a circle here in the corner and fill it in. Just like that. Now, part of doing a science experiment is testing different theories. So you can play around with different size shapes, so different sized hearts. You can try creating open hearts like this. You can fill them in. Play around with that and see how it changes the experiment. But once you have your design on your plate, this is where the magic kicks in. So you have your shape. Get ready to grab your container of water. Now, the secret to this, and you can use a very shallow dish. It doesn't need to be deep. Shallow is actually better. But there's a trick to this. I tried this earlier and kind of dumped the water on top, and it broke my shapes apart. So the key with this is to be very, very gentle and almost create a slow trickle of water near your shape. So you want it to be very gentle. You don't want to disturb the shapes too much. So I'm just going to fill it enough so that all of my shapes are submerged in water. And very, very gentle. You don't want to break them apart. I used about a cup, so 8 ounces of water on top of my shallow plate. Okay. So I have my water on top, and what's going to happen, because the dry marker, the ink inside is insoluble, so it does not dissolve in water, it's going to start to lift up. The edges are going to begin to lift up in the water, and it almost starts to curl in just a little bit. So let me see if I can move the camera so you can see that happening. And it can take a little bit. Let me move you in just a bit closer. Let me see if you can see that. Okay, so it's gonna start to lift. My edges are already lifting up off the plate, especially with this larger one right here. So give it a few minutes. I'm gonna move the camera back to about here. Okay, and you can try kneeling, looking at the edges, and seeing if it's beginning to lift off your plate. And once you see it lifting and beginning to float on top, you can take your straw or a finger and you can begin to move your shape around. So let's test that now that our shape is lifted, and let's see if we can get our heart to race around our plate. Okay, we are back. I moved the camera again because the heart has now fully floated to the top of the water, and it can take a few seconds. One thing I did have to do with this heart is I used my straw to really gently blow around the edges of it to get it to fully lift up. If it breaks, don't worry about it. That sometimes happens. That's okay. Just retry. But this has fully lifted up. it's intact, and now I'm going to use my straw first to show you how it floats around the plate. Are you ready? And you can see it floating. So this started out as just a dry erase heart shape on our plate. And we've now been able to lift it off and make it float, and we can chase it around the plate like this. If you don't have a straw, gently, you can use your fingers to kind of move it around. This, I've noticed, has a tendency to break it a little bit more, but you can see. There it goes. So play around with your shape, whether it's solid or not. Also try changing the temperature of the water that you use. Does that have an effect on how quickly it lifts the shape? Also, does the color of dry erase marker matter? I used black. That didn't really work as well. I noticed for me, purple and blue worked much better. And then you can also make games out of it. You can have two people create shapes, and then like soccer, have two goalies, and you can try to get your heart over onto their side. So you can make a game out of it as well. So it's simple. We used physics, a dry erase marker, and a plate to do a really fun and simple science experiment. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining me for today's experiment. Really simple, really fun, packs a big wow factor when you can show your friends and family that you can get a dry erase heart to float off your plate as if it's magic. If you're interested in more of these science concepts, definitely check out the variety of student-centered databases that we have on our website at emcfl.org through our student resource page, as well as visit your online catalog for MCFL, and through your local branch and their curbside service, you can pick up a variety of juvenile nonfiction books on physics, science experiments, anything that you can think of. We probably have a book for it. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining me, and I'll see you next time for more experimenting and more fun. Take care, everybody.